Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Purposeful Conversations with me, Emee, here in the Pami Code Facebook community. Now, I have a really very special guest with you for you today. We've been talking a lot about managing resilience, coping with stress, really quite heavy stuff over the past couple of days. But for today, let's sprinkle a little bit of magic in our conversation and add a little bit of sparkle to our conversations in our community. So for today, I invited our very special guest. They are a coach, poet, leader, and change maker, and we're here to talk about how to unleash your magic. So without further ado, let's all welcome Assetou Xango. Hi, Assetou.
Hi. So
Hi.
glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I mean, I've been, checking you out on your profile, your website, and I can really sense the energy. I can really sense the magic, just, watching you on your profiles and your website, and I can't wait to learn more about how to unleash this magic because you certainly have it. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and how did you get into what you are doing now?
Yeah, so I have been a spoken word poet for about 10 or 11 years. I'm the Aurora Poet Laureate, which is just the poet laureate of my city here in Colorado. And that, all of my poetry centers around women's empowerment, most specifically. And that just kind of happened quite naturally, and there was no other way for me to express myself, it seems. And then really looking down the path of, okay, what do I want my career to be? Can't work for anyone else, can't feel like I'm having to restrict myself because I was a full-time artist for about 2 years, but I was working in schools and there was always this kind of, cloud above my head of, oh my gosh, what would the parents think? What about the principal and stuff? And I've begun to find those schools who really embrace all of the aspects of who I am and what I do. But even then, it just felt a little constricting. And what I've always done is I have been in people's face about living their truest life and being their truest self and, dispelling these myths about what you can and cannot make money off of. And I've just always been like, all of my friends are just exhausted by me all the time because that is all I could ever do. So being a personal coach for folks and coaching them into how to unleash that inherent magic, how to live their truest life, how to be themselves inside and out and express that fully without fear of, of losing a job or losing a paycheck or anything like that. That just came quite naturally. So it's been a difficult transition, as everything is, when you're releasing parts of yourself that you think to be true, but also just a very natural transition.
Right. Yeah. So you actually really embrace that, and it's quite courageous as well because there's so much pressure for people to actually find a stable if
Mm-hmm.
there's such a thing,
Yeah.
stable job, that has a regular paycheck every month, that is dependable. Well, for
Yeah,
me,
right. That story just starts to fall apart the moment you think about it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I followed a, well, not really similar because you're an artist. I can see that you have this free soul. But for me, in terms of my entrepreneurial journey, I also feel the sense like, yeah, I've been working in academia for 20 years. I feel as if there is some academic freedom in the sense that I can write about whatever I want, I can research about whatever I want to research. But since the budget cuts happened, since the funding got cut,
Yeah.
there were limitations on what we can and cannot do. And
Mhm.
I felt as if that academic freedom was sort of curtailed a little bit. And that, for me, initially academia had the best of both worlds in that, okay, it has like the regular, dependable paycheck, but at the same time I can explore my own research interests. But when that freedom was taken away, it's like, I don't think this is for me. So yeah, it's just exploring that freedom and being able to pursue my own path. It's quite scary, but it can be quite liberating. And I'm assuming that you do help other films, if you like, to explore that, and to own their magic and to own their power. And how are you finding it so far? I mean, what's the you
I'm in absolute love. I'm just every day I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my job. I'm doing this. Oh my gosh, I'm doing this, because it's so much a part of me to not only find my own liberation, but to help others find theirs. Like that's just such a core part of me, that getting to do it as a job, it's just insane. And I always struggled with this idea that you must do something other than who you are in order to make a living. Like that, like even in the wording, that doesn't make sense.
mm.
Can I live? Can I live to make a living? Is that okay? You know what I mean? It's an absurd concept. So to be able to live and do what I would already do, but then to do it intentionally, right? To say, hey, okay, here is this entire program. I'm going to take you through the steps to heal all of the internal negative stories, all of the unworthiness, all of the things that were given to you by people, right? These stories we inherited. We inherited the story that we must have a 9-to-5 job in order to be stable. That, like, if we zoom out, that actually doesn't seem all the way true, right? People lose their jobs all the time. This COVID-19 showed us how quickly we can be that far away from disaster. And what you're experiencing, the academia, and thinking oh, this is great, this is perfect, and then in a moment they can take it away, right? And you don't have that freedom to decide. So okay, these are stories that are not necessarily true. So can we just recognize at first that they're stories? Can we recognize the stories that we're holding in our bodies, that we're assuming are true? Just become aware of them, because many of them we're not even aware of. We just accept them as a fact. And so when you become aware of it, it's like, okay, now if reality doesn't really exist, right? If there's no objective reality, then we can question if this story serves me. Does it make me feel light, or does it make me feel
Mm.
heavy? Because anything that makes you feel heavy isn't yours. Anything that makes you feel heavy is somebody else's baggage that you picked up along the way and you've been carrying. So does this make me feel light, or does it make me feel heavy? And if it makes me feel heavy, how can I let it go? And so I get to move people all the way through that process, instead of just giving my friends unsolicited advice all the time. I get to
Yeah.
have people come to me and say, okay, no, I'm ready for this. I am ready to step into my power. I'm ready to step into my magic and be visible and be free and be in love with my life. And they commit to that journey with me. So then I get to see it all the way through.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense. It's so much fun. I am so deeply in love with it, and it's paying all the bills and then some. So it works out perfectly.
Like win win win. And
Right.
that's the thing, it's actually really quite satisfying when you see the transformation happen, for your clients. You see where they start off, and then how you support them to make that change and transform. And it's sort of, from what you were saying earlier, it kind of reminds me of what we usually talk about in community psychology, when we talk about reality is something that we construct, that when
Right.
you accept that reality is not something that you just receive, that
Right.
you're not a passive receiver of reality, that you actually can co-create and actually make your own reality. It can be quite empowering, because
Yes.
it gives you the opportunity to actually shape how you want to shape your life. And because I'm coming from a discourse analytic background, meaning it's our language that can actually shape. And I'm sure as a poet, this would actually resonate with you as well, that language is such a powerful tool that we can use to create our reality. And the words that we express, the words that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves, instead of just absorbing and taking on the stories that we should take,
Right.
but instead, we create it and we live it, and it's actually more liberating that way.
Right. And I go so far as to say, not that we can create a reality, but we do. We constantly are. So then how can you become aware of what you're creating? Right. And you can look at it either way. You can look at it internally, like what's coming up in me, where is my resistance? Or you can look at it externally. What do I have? And where might that belief be hiding? Right? Because we're always creating our reality. So if we become aware of it, then we can better create the reality that we actually want.
Absolutely. And what I've noticed with you as well is that you actually talk a lot about power, and it's not just from an individual perspective but more of a social and community empowerment. So tell me a little bit more about your advocacy and your passion about community empowerment.
That's such a great question. So it's interesting because it does feel, here's what I think. I think the more that we become anything, like on a deep cellular level, the more impossible it becomes to not emanate that. Right. So in me knowing my power, knowing how easy it is to shift anything in my life, to shift the numbers in my bank account, to shift, what I'm doing for a living, like how quickly our desires can manifest when we become aware of the relationship between us and the world. When I embody that, it is impossible for me not to bring in my community and say, hey, look, we're not actually bound by these systems that are meant to kill us. Like, let's be real. The economic system, the healthcare system, like they are not designed to keep us alive. And we can see that very, very clearly now more than ever. So it just becomes natural once you find the truth for yourself to move out and want to spread it. That I think that's just genuinely human nature. But we're social creatures, you know what I mean? We're social creatures and we're meant to connect in that way. And I also know that my liberation, my healing can't happen in a vacuum.
Mm,
It's not a full transition until it is visible. And I've always done that with my writing. I've always done that with my
yeah.
poetry. I've been very vulnerable and spoken a lot about my deeper wounds and my childhood trauma. And in doing so, I've been liberated from it. And I
Yes.
don't think that would have happened if I were just in my room with my journal keeping all the secrets to myself.
You actually get to share it. And yeah, you do talk a lot about healing. And is this something that you help your clients with, when it
Yes.
comes
So
to
my main program is called Dark Goddess Healing. So the core of it is healing. And so I talk a lot about unleashing your inherent magic. I talk a lot about the power. I talk a lot about the results that you get. But the program is really about that deep inner child work, that deep parts work. I've studied a lot of trauma informed care. I've studied a lot of therapeutic modalities. I've worked at, youth shelters and stuff like that. So a lot of that comes in, my spiritual aspects come in, my artistic aspects come in. So yeah, we are, because that's what stands in most people's way. Like I just had a recent client who signed on. She has a business coach. She has all of this going for her. She's like, I do it every day. I show up to my business every day,
Mm,
and yet it's not blossoming. And then we get to the core of like, I don't feel worthy of
mm,
receiving this money. I don't feel worthy. Like what I'm doing is enough to sustain me, right? All those stories start to come up.
mm.
So it's great to have the business coaches. It's great to have the, like direct empowerment or joy coaches. But if you're not doing that underlying work to
That
heal
inner
the
work.
narratives, it doesn't really work out at the end. So that's what I get to the core of. And
Right.
and then immediate shifts.
Yeah. So when it comes to unleashing your magic, so you start with the inner work. First, do you heal? What if
Mhm.
someone says, "Well, I have nothing to heal. I've got nothing there." It's like, is that even possible? Are they in denial, or how do
I
how
mean,
how do
I'd
you
have to
respond to
talk
that?
to them. I'd have to talk to them. My sense is if you are not okay, so we do this thing where we pretend we're the victim of our life circumstance. I had one client say, I know I'm good. I know that I'm ready to step into my purpose, but I'm afraid of what other people are going to think. And I was like, okay, well, if I told you that your nose was too small, what would you think about that? And she was like, wow, nothing. That's dumb. And it's like, of course, you wouldn't care if you didn't already believe it. If there wasn't already something in you that was latched onto that,
Mm,
you wouldn't have that problem. So if there are things in your life that are not aligned with what you want them to be, something's getting in the way. Does that necessarily mean you had a huge childhood trauma? Absolutely not. Does it mean that there is some story and some belief and some commitment that you have to something that is other than what you want? Yes, there is. Let's locate that and talk to that and heal that, because
mm,
usually it just boils down to a conversation with that part to say, hey, I see that you're trying to protect me or whatever it's trying to do. and it's not working, right? Like you're trying to
It's a
protect me from this
block.
thing. Yeah, you're trying to protect me from this thing that isn't happening. And what we're actually doing is we're blocking from the thing that I want. So let's get on the same page and figure out how we can actually get that thing.
Right.
And it usually does link back to that 0 to 7. Sometimes I get a lot of folks who it's like middle school age, because that's a
Mm.
really rough age for a lot of
What
people.
sort of issues are coming up around that age group?
For the middle schoolers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a lot of feeling isolated, feeling right. Our core animalistic, like old brain is you can't get rejected from the tribe, because if you got rejected from the tribe, you died. If you weren't
Mm.
surrounded by human beings in this open, wild world, you got eaten by a cougar. You ran out of food. You know what I mean? So we have this deep desire to be a part of something. We have a deep desire to be a part of a community. And so the number one like story that comes up is, oh, if I do this, I'll be rejected, right? If
Mm.
I speak my truth, people won't be able to resonate with me and I'll get rejected from the tribe. And so like that middle school, when you're being teased, when you're being outcasted, that really, really triggers that for a lot of people.
Right. It's that fear of rejection and that fear of being judged. That's why they couldn't actually unleash their magic, because they are afraid that people are going to kick them out like, "Ay." But
Yep.
those thoughts, those are just really stories
Mhm.
that you make up in your head. And you couldn't really actually test if it's true or not unless you actually test it
Did
out.
the thing, right? And then, of course, once people do the thing, once they become visible, once they tell their story, they so often find that people resonate with it. That people are that instead of being rejected from the tribe, and sure, like you sometimes get rejected from the people who are not in resonance with what you're experiencing, but you move into deeper, authentic, intimate relationship with those who are resonating with what
Mm.
you have to say. And because you are no longer masking it or feeling like you have to censor it, people resonate even more deeply because it just cuts to the core of what they're experiencing.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because yeah, when as we are talking about unleashing your magic, people are afraid to do that for, being judged, to be judged, to be ridiculed, to be
Right.
cast away. But actually what happens is when you actually speak your truth, when you unleash your magic, those who don't want your magic, they would say, no, not for me. And that's not such a bad thing,
At
because
all.
at least now you're filtering those people who aren't really for you. And now you're actually attracting those who are meant to be, who's aligned with what you have to say, and those who actually should be part of your circle, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I see a lot of people get to that point and freeze. Because in order to unleash your inherent magic, step into your power, all these things we're talking about, you have to be willing to give up what you are no longer, right? There are stories that we tell ourselves, about who we are. From the moment I was born, people called me a name, and with that name was associated some character traits. And if I acted
Mm.
outside of that character traits, I was given feedback immediately. Oh, that's not like you. Oh, you're so this, right? And that is how I ingrained, like, oh, okay, Assetou does this and doesn't do this, right? So then when I get to the point where it's like, no, Assetou actually wants to do this thing completely different, or that I think is completely different, and these people who have meant so much to me may not be able to withstand that transformation. I have to be willing and able to retell that story and let those folks go. And that can become really, really challenging for people, especially because there's always that moment of void, right?
Mm.
I think of the what are those, the trapeze artists,
Oh, right, when
when
you let
they're swinging from
go.
one, right, and they can't, there's a moment where you can't be holding on to the last bar, and
Okay.
you haven't yet grabbed the next bar, and you're just midair. And
Mm.
it's that moment of not yet and no longer. And
Mm.
so that is when people like to turn back. And so I love to be there for them in that process and just hold the truth for them. Like, no, this is exactly what you
Go
want.
for it.
Stepping
Yeah.
into your purpose, and that bar will appear. Like, don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy. I've never really thought of it that way, because, yeah, for some people say, take the leap, take the leap. It's just there, take the leap. And they would take the leap and they realize, like, I'm gonna fall.
It's like that cartoon moment where they're
Like,
hanging in midair, like, Oh
Yeah,
no.
oh dear. Well, actually, yeah, you are there, but if you just keep going, it will appear like maybe it will just appear out of nowhere and you'll have something to grab onto. But when you have that really clear sense of purpose as well, you'll do whatever it takes to actually get to where you need to be.
Right.
When you take that leap, it can be quite it takes a lot of courage to let go of the, I don't want to say baggage, but to let go of that identity, to let go of the stories that you've been holding on to for so long, because it's comfortable, it's what you know. And
Failure.
when you actually let go, it's
Mhm.
unfamiliar, you might not even see it yet, but when you keep going and when you have that really clear sense of purpose and you know what you're going for, it can be so exhilarating.
Oh, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, and the truth of it is we do this. We shed our skin as often as snakes do. Like this is part of the process of living. If you were the same thing the whole time, what would be the thrill? Like this is
Hmm.
part of it every time. And the more kind of awareness you have and choice you have in what you become, I think the more exhilarating it is.
Yeah, all these transformations as we go through life, we evolve, we meet new people, our roles shift, our priorities shift. And if you stay and become the same person throughout your life, it might not be fit for purpose anymore because your circumstances are changing and your life stage is changing. If you're gonna stay as the teenager and you're holding on to those beliefs for so long, it might not actually be appropriate to where you really want to be in your life,
Yeah.
right? So if you have any words of encouragement, I really would love to hear some of your poetry, something inspiring and motivating to help us to unleash your magic. What do you have to say to us?
Okay, so I is it inspiring or motivating? Perhaps. I also write very
Challenging?
yes, I love that word.
Mm.
I was gonna say cutthroat, but that works too.
Oh.
So yeah, so this one
Yeah.
I think I tend to get a lot of feedback that it kind of helps people liberate themselves around this particular topic. So I'll go with that. Give your daughters difficult names. Names that command the full use of the tongue. My name makes you want to tell me the truth. My name does not allow me to trust anyone who cannot pronounce it right. Washan Shere. Many of my role models, contemporaries, but especially ancestors, have a name that brings the tongue to worship. Names that feel like ritual in your mouth. I don't want a name said without pause, muttered without intention. I am through with names that leave me unmoved. Names that leave the speaker's mouth unscathed. I want a name like fire, like rebellion, like my hand gripping masses whip. No, I want a name from before the ships. A name Officer Wilson might choke on. I want a name that catches you in the throat if you say it wrong, and if you're afraid to say it wrong. And I guess you should be. I want a name only the brave can say. A name that only fits right in the mouth of those who love me right, because only the brave can love me right. Assetou Xango is the name you take when you are tired of bearing your jewels under thick layers of soot and self-doubt. Assetou the light, Xango the pickaxe, so that people must mine your soul just to get your attention. If you have to ask why I changed my name, it is already too far beyond your comprehension. Call me callous, but with a name like Xango, I cannot afford to tread lightly. You go hard or you go home, and I am centuries and shifts away from any semblance of a homeland. I'm a thief's poor bookkeeping skills away from any source of ancestry. I am blindly collecting the shattered pieces of a continent much long. I'm blindly collecting the shattered pieces of a continent much larger than my comprehension. I hate explaining my name to people. Their eyes peering over my journal looking for history they can rewrite. Ask me what my name means. Can I cuss on this?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Ask me what my
We're
name.
adults here.
Okay, cool, cool. Ask me what my name means. What the fuck does your name mean, Jackie? Not every word needs an English equivalent in order to have significance. I am done folding myself up to fit your stereotype. Your Black friend, your African queen, mean your desire to learn the rhetoric of solidarity without the practice. I am trying to build a country, a continent, a home. The body is the safest place when you do not know its name. Assetou is what it sounds like when you are trying to bend syllables into a home. With shaky shudders and when whistling through your empty, I feel empty. Motherless. There is no home in a body, no safety in a name. A name is honestly just a name. No, that's not quite right. A name is honestly just a ritual, and mine still sounds like reverence. So that's that poem.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. It's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. You are the first one to actually share poetry in our community. Yeah,
Really?
we've done a lot of awesome things. Like we've done a bit of yoga, we've done a bit of tapping, but
Fine.
but this is the very first poetry session in the community.
Honored.
And we actually, we call our group, the PAMI code. It's, living with purpose, action, momentum, and energy. And
Love
I
that.
feel so blessed to actually feel your energy and have so much magic shared with us today. So I say to thank you very much for sharing your insights and your words with us. If people would like to learn more about you and if they'd like to get in touch, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So my website is assetouxango.com. All over it, there are places where you could book a call with me if you wanted to chat more about what we've talked about. If something intrigued you and you're like, how does that apply to my circumstance? I'd love to talk with you about that. Also, you can follow me on Facebook, Assetou Xango. You can follow me on Instagram at Assetou Xango. I'm the only person in the world who has this name, so it works out. I have all the domains. So like, if you search this name, you get me. And then also, if you're wanting to find more of my poetry, you can Google this name and you'll see a lot of it on YouTube.
Your
So I'm
performances and
accessible.
amazing. Thank you very much, Ashaytu. And to everyone who's watching this, I feel that we've been blessed to have this conversation today, and I hope that you really enjoyed our interview today. And really from today's session, I hope that you've been inspired to actually unleash your magic. You don't just owe it to yourself, but you actually owe it to those who need to experience your magic as well. If you're holding on to that because you are afraid that you will be judged, you are afraid that people will cast you away. Don't worry about that, because those who will judge you, they're not for you. Let them go. Share your truth, speak your truth, embrace your magic, and share it with the world, because those who need to hear it, and you need to share it. And if you keep holding on to it, it just stays with you, and you wouldn't want to take it to the grave, right? So thank you again, and yeah, we'll catch up again next time for another purposeful conversations with me, Emmy, here in the PAMI Code Facebook group. Until then, take care and bye for now. Bye. Bye.